remember not to say anything terrible.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I'm Michelle. We do have a special little co-host this evening. Landon is joining us, but he's like completely in the zone, so he's going to pass out in like 30 seconds here. And with me this evening is Erika Swyler. Hello. Thank you so much for joining.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I really need to start remembering to ask this before we start, but did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. It's actually so much easier than it looks. People get very concerned when they see that Y, but it's Swyler. It's fine.
Okay, perfect. I always mean to ask, and I think of that question as the words are coming out of my mouth. It's like,
as long as people do, it doesn't matter to me when they ask. It's fine.
And Diana should be joining us this evening. She is, getting ready to go to Paris. So
hardships.
I know. So last minute packing stuff and all that. But she said she will try to stop by. So hopefully she does. I love watching him fall asleep. It's the funniest.
I know. It's pretty adorable, I got to tell you. Not having one of my own, I'm just, sucking this up. This is great.
I have another one sleeping on the couch right now. And usually she's the one that co-hosts with us on occasion. But she's at the age where she's not shy anymore, which is awesome. But when she co-hosts the show, it's, hi, I'm Lily. And we're like, okay, great. But we are here this evening to talk about your amazing book, The Book of Speculation. Now, true confession moment. Super crazy, hectic month. I started grad school this month, so my
gosh, yeah, congratulations.
Thanks. I may not have thought this through all the way, but because of that, my schedule is just crazy busy, and I don't have as much time to read as I did, a month ago. So I was like, last night, I was like, I haven't finished the book yet. I need to finish the book. I was like, okay, 200 pages. I got this. And then I fell asleep.
Oh, no.
So my kids watched a lot of TV today.
That's good. It's good. Imagination.
Right. We did a bunch of different shows, and I finished the book this afternoon. And I was texting Diana the whole time going, oh my God, this happened. And there are a couple.
I like this out. This means I get your really fresh reaction. That's excellent. Yeah. I rarely get that. I get that after people have discussed a lot, and picked apart what they think. And it's always nice to have an immediate reaction. So this is good.
Well, it'll definitely be an immediate reaction because Diana and I haven't even dissected it the way we usually do. And for anyone who has not read the book, just disclaimer right now, there are going to be spoilers. So
as long as you do it and I don't.
So if you are still in the middle of the book or planning on picking it up, I would bookmark this episode and come back to it in a couple days. But yeah, definitely going to be spoilers, because the first thing, I wish I could show you a screenshot of the text messages that I sent her, because the first bombshell, there were so many bombshells, I feel like, in this book. And the first big one for me was when you found out who actually set the curse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Madame Ryskova, I wasn't really sure about her at the beginning, but you know what? I also wasn't sure about Doyle. Like I was very much anti-Doyle in one of our first episodes when we talked about him, and Diana was all for him, and I said, I don't like this guy. Who is he? He just shows up with his tattoos and his octopus tentacles.
But did you still feel that way by the end? Because my favorite thing about Doyle, and my whole purpose in working with a character like that, is I really enjoy having people who start out as being slightly sinister, possibly bad people, and then you just love them. You start to. It's sort of a feeling of power in a way, to be able to take a potentially sinister person and reveal them slowly to be this beautiful thing. because I guess that's, that's sort of what I like. It's the idea of really getting to know somebody. And so Doyle is sort of my character for that.
Well, he's such an interesting character too, because, and I'm gonna pause here because I have been saving this wine for tonight. I found this wine
nice
like 3 weeks ago, and it's Freak Show, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to get this wine for Erika's episode because it's perfect.
That's excellent. Is it good?
It's actually very good. I wasn't really sure. I've never tried it before, but it's quite good.
Now I'm gonna have to try it. Yeah.
It's and the label. Sometimes I totally label shop. Like I just go, oh, that's pretty.
Yeah, I'll let winemakers know you do that too. So.
But I think that kind of goes to like all of the freak shows and the freaks and everything that people think that they're scary or they're evil, but if you just get to know them a little bit, it's like Shrek, peel the onion.
They're all just people, but I also enjoy the aspect of freak shows because it indulges, when it's not being exploitative, it indulges this really human characteristic that we all have to just go, what is that? And can I stare at it? And can I figure out how that works? And people who really embrace that about humans themselves, I find fascinating and interesting. And I mean, now the freak show now tends to be much more of a physical act. People who don't necessarily have deformities, but have learned to twist their bodies in certain ways and do it in that sort of sense. And I find that really appealing too, because it's investing in becoming other and indulging this human fantasy to figure out how the strange works. So I find that, something I like to dig into, just the uncanny, I guess.
And that kind of leads into my first question was, there are so many different plot lines in your story, and they all like weave together really well. And I've read books that try to weave together a lot of different things at once, and it's really hard to follow. But Diana's here.
Oh, hi.
And you, hello.
Hello.
How are you? Are you packed? Is Speed? Oh my gosh, I forgot your turtle's name.
Zippy?
Thank you. I was gonna say Speedy.
Close. He's as happy as he's gonna be. Our tortoise sitter has not come yet, so I may have to cut out early for that.
Oh, no.
Well, we've just kind of discussed a little bit about Doyle, and I'm sure you have your comments because you've been Team Doyle from the start.
Of course I'm Team Doyle. I mean, not just because I share a love of octopuses with Doyle. I think he embodies that whole, pardon my vernacular, but he embodies that whole, the idea of a freak.
Yeah.
You look at him and right off the bat, it's like you want to judge him by how he looks. And as it goes on, you see he's a really nice guy. But of course, I like him right from the beginning because I do enjoy freaks. I love freak shows, and I think odd people are the most beautiful people in the world. And of course, he's covered in octopus tentacles, and I have a thing for octopuses. So
yeah.
So yeah, the husband and I had a discussion about octopus tattoos.
I love them. Go figure. But it was the sort of thing when I was trying to figure out, I knew I wanted to make a tattooed man, but I wanted to find something that would be immediately eerie, but also really beautiful. And tentacles have that sort of thing about them, how they're really sinister. And you think about tentacles like pulling down ships and things like that. But also they're just really, really beautiful. And it's so alien at the same time. So that was the easiest way to put him as other, was to cover him in a full body octopus tattoo.
And I think if the Book of Speculation were made into a movie, which I think it definitely should be, that character would be so much fun to create and transform for visually. And
oh yeah. Did that poor guy in the makeup chair though? Oh my God.
I'll just have to bring
I
the
do
book.
have to take a few minutes to show you guys what I'm drinking out of.
Oh, yeah.
I did it just for tonight.
Oh, I love it. Oh,
It's a tiki mug, and it's from the Tonga Hut in North Hollywood. So I made my husband pull this one out of the cabinet. So it's like, I have to use this one tonight.
Oh, that's amazing. I feel my mug game is really low. I have like a good mug because I went to the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey last show, and so all of the various merch, and so I have like circus mugs around, and I just wasn't thinking. I wasn't. So yeah, I missed my own theme. This is terrible.
That's okay. We'll forgive you this time.
I'll do better.
Yeah.
Well,
on the show again, you have to be in theme.
Right.
What's funny is as I finished the book, and then I was reading the short story at the end of it, and it was about Paulina, and all of a sudden, I don't even know why this came up, but my daughter comes up to me and she goes, "Mommy, I wish I was a mermaid." I'm like, "No."
I was like, "No, don't do that. It's bad." But yeah, I think it's interesting because I think people get really attached to this idea of a mermaid in like the sailor sense, and they think, "Oh, well, that's what this book is about." It's like, no, it's a little bit more of it's the breath holder thing, and that sort of I guess I got that thinking about pearl divers and free divers. And free diving to me is like, it's the most insane sport, but it's also really, really beautiful. And I think it's the closest thing that we can get on Earth to doing like a spacewalk. You just, because there's no air and you're diving down and you're in a completely alien world. And that, to me, that sort of in-between space is a really fascinating place to play. And it's also the sort of thing where people really can hold their breath for like 9-10 minutes. Like they absolutely can. And it's crazy and it's very dangerous and you don't always come back from it. But yeah, so I just wanted to play on that edge of this could be real, this might not be. And that's sort of the thing I like about a magical realism. You can get that kind of dose of reality, but also change it to envelop a little bit of the fantastical. So. And
that was one of my, going back to all the plot lines, what was kind of the core idea, that the spark that brought about this novel?
It kind of came about in two parts. And I think the 1790s storyline came to me first, and it came to me while I was taking a bath. In about 30 seconds, the whole thing fully formed. So it was like the best bath of my life. And like I got out and I immediately sat down and spewed out 30 pages, and nothing like that had ever happened to me before. So I was like, oh, okay, now what? And I knew that I wanted to tell a story of an entire family. And an entire family isn't like what we think of as the nuclear unit. It's generations and how they all contribute to this idea of what people are. So I knew I wanted to stretch it across time, and I knew that I had to find a way to incorporate the area in which I live, which is it's ecologically fragile. It's starting to disappear. And I wanted to write about it so I could remember it as it was and show it to people while it's still here. And part of that has to do with houses falling off the cliff. And so Simon's house had to be incorporated into this somehow. And this comes from when I was very little, and I'd be walking along the beaches and see these houses up on the edge, and I'd wonder, who lives there? How did it get that way? So that's where Simon comes from. And weaving those two stories together is a lot of, like when you look around the dinner table at like a big family gathering and you just go, who are these people? And
that's me every Thanksgiving.
Exactly. That awkward Thanksgiving moment is sort of the genesis of how it all weaved together. So that's the sloppiest way I can really explain what happened. But yeah, it really started with Amos in the 1790s.
That's interesting. I don't think I would have guessed that it would have started with Amos. I probably would have thought that it would start with Simon. But I also wondered when I was reading Paulina's story if it actually started with Paulina. So, and I was wondering if
Yeah.
Mermaid Girl came first, and then that led to the Book of Speculation.
No, it actually, so this book went through 1.5 million drafts. It took me forever to figure out how to write it because I didn't start out intending to be a novelist. So it actually started, the main voice was going to be, in the present day, was going to be Enola. And Enola was sort of driven by all these voices from the past, but she's sort of read as a little too frenetic to follow and really hold a plot together. And also, in some ways, Enola is much smarter than Simon. At least I see her as being that way. So I needed somebody, and she would recognize her own craziness and her own contribution to this sort of curse problem, whereas Simon doesn't necessarily recognize himself as being any part of the family, really. You know, he sees himself as a family of one. So he can't unveil the plot too quickly, which is what Enola would do. So that's why it moved away from her, but she's still, I love her a lot.
I really liked it too. She was such a great character. I mean, when she first comes in, you're not quite so sure about her, and then, you know, you warm up to her as she comes along. I'm still fascinated with the houses. So where you're at, the houses are actually falling off the cliffs?
Yeah, I remember forever ago, I had a conversation with my agent over like email or something. She's like, do houses really do that? And I like sent her a video. And because the bluffs in this area, they're all sand. You know, most of Long Island is just, it's basically we're leftover Connecticut from a glacier. So yeah, it's just a big sand pile. And so the more water you get, the more it goes away. And so these houses started back hundreds and hundreds of feet from the edge, slowly over the years just creep up. And eventually, if you don't bulkhead enough, which costs an awful lot of money, your house will go over. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, it's crazy. So it's like I am, in fact, watching climate change happen in real time. So,
that is crazy. And I mean, so I'm assuming by incorporating the house, you really you meant for that to be a metaphor for Simon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite pop culture sort of reference for it is, have you seen Little Miss Sunshine?
Yeah.
It's been a while, but yes.
And you know how the bus is basically like a character?
Yeah.
That, and the bus is the family and all that. That was the house for Simon. And, you know, it's him, it's the legacy, it's all of it. And it's also, if you've ever been willed something that you didn't necessarily want, it's that sort of thing, you know, where it's like, oh, it's this legacy that somebody meant me to have, and I don't really want it, but I don't know how to get rid of it either. So yeah, it's that he has that battle with responsibility, which I sort of, you know, that hits close to home for me, I think. So I don't want to be responsible for anything.
I know that feeling sometimes. I don't want to adult today.
All the time.
I'm very bad at adulting.
Yes.
Now, for Amos, why was he mute?
This is one of my favorite things to talk about for women. I really wanted to explore a male character who could do at first nothing but listen, and had to focus on his interior life solely. And because so much of his story is this struggle for language, I wanted every word he says or tries to say means more. And everything that he says is open to, you know, complete misinterpretation because he's communicating through solely metaphor. So the best way to do that for me was to take words away from him. And there's also, I guess there's something called wild child syndrome. I think that's what it is. I think Nell is supposed to be somewhat about that. Where if you don't hear enough language by a certain age, you don't develop it. So I wanted to play with that a little bit, just because that, in theory, would happen to an abandoned child. So, you know, it was delving in that world. But yeah, I really thought it was important to me for him to be a character that you would empathize with, that his struggle for speech becomes basically the way to understanding what it is to be a sensitive human. Because for me, he's the character that's like so dear to my heart. Like he's just a little cream puff. But And that's it, because he can't really say anything terrible. Everything he has to do means so much because he has to try so hard to get his point across. So.
Well, and then even by the end of his storyline, you forget that he was like this wild. He even did the wild boy when that came back in the story. I forgot that he even did that.
Yeah, it was really mean of me to put him back there, but you have to do that to characters. The ones that you like the most have to suffer the most, unfortunately. Good fiction.
I found his ending fitting because, I mean, especially when you bring up the wild child syndrome. Because I remember I got my bachelor's in sociology, and so that was something that we really studied was that wild child syndrome. Yeah, and I remember seeing there was a video. I can't remember the girl's name, but I remember the video of the girl who basically had wild child syndrome back in the 60s. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I said right.
Yeah, and she couldn't speak no matter how much she tried to reintroduce her into society. Just like with Amos, she couldn't speak. She was still very wild. And I remember the videos of her hoarding water. That was her thing.
Right.
Hoarded water, yeah. And I found it so fitting that, he would go back into the wild because I could see her going back into the wild because that's what she knew. And that's what he knew. That was his comfort.
Yeah, and it was, I think, also just the idea to be less him, to be less who he had become, because he had become a thing, that's an image of what he started as. And so I thought for me, it seemed fitting that he would just want to disperse and go away. And I think a lot of people by the end forgot that he could vanish. So it was fun for me to just kind of bring that back and just say, oh, just kind of disappears, because that's what he can do. So.
Yeah, I love that part. I love the fact that he could disappear. That was quite cool. I
just always thought of it as sort of like, I don't know, his little moment of Zen meditation, he could do it. But when you see people like those paintings of, well, people who paint themselves to match a background or something like that, and they just turn, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, there's a person there. That's how I thought of it. Which I probably didn't describe it that way, but that's what I was thinking of at the time. That's what it was like to me.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Well, there were a couple. I think you did a really good job at keeping the end hidden. Like, I couldn't. Well, at least I couldn't guess what was coming at first. There was a couple times when Simon, at the very beginning, like before he and Alice started dating, where he was watching her at the library, and he said that he slowed his breath to match like her movements. I was like, oh, okay, so he's Amos's descendant, because he's going to be able to do the disappearing thing that he does. And then that didn't happen. And then there was, then you found out who set the curse, and who the Rusalkas were. Right. And this morning when I was getting closer to the end, I started texting Diana, and I said, okay, so I'm kind of thinking that, because the whole time in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, all right, who's going to die? Like, who is the one being, like, who's being consumed? So, right, like,
first, yeah.
The Rusalkas, they consume someone. So I'm trying to figure out who's being consumed, who's being drowned right now without realizing it.
Right.
So I texted Diana, I said, I think it's Simon. I think Enola's consumed. I think he's being consumed by this book and by the obsession and everything. And she goes, or maybe he's just the first male Rusalka of his family, and he's the one doing the consuming. And I was like, oh.
Oh my God, this is my favorite reaction ever. I love this.
I was like, he's the one that won't leave, and he's tied to the water, and he's the one that loves swimming. Like, oh my God, he's going to kill someone.
Well, at a certain point, I want to say I had like, I've written the ending to that, I want to say 60 times if I wrote it once, and it ended differently each time. So I'm always happy when people say, oh, I can't figure out the ending, because neither could I at first. I've had endings where Nola dies, where he dies, where they both dies, where everybody lives. It just, yeah. So trying to find ways to do the story justice and at the same time not be so bleak that it had no redemptive quality to it. So, yeah.
How did you know that this ending was the ending?
Because there are 3 more pages I kept to myself. If that makes any sense. Like, so I have an ending for me that I know how their story ends. And I think I stopped it at a point where every reader can add 3 more pages and make themselves really happy. And I think that for me was important. I always like cutting off an ending just before it's done. And not so anyone can write a sequel, but so you can, so the reader is more active and the world feels like it's a little more real. Because
like Tiger and the Princess story. That's my favorite short story. One of my favorites, I should say, with Tiger and the Princess. You don't know which one the boy's going to choose. Is he going to choose the door with the tiger, or is he going to choose the door with the princess? It's just like that.
Yeah, so I wanted that sort of, I mean, and I've had people ask me like, oh, are you ever going to do anything like with Enola and Doyle on the road? No, I'm not, because that's, you know, that story for me is done. I have my ending for them. And I think what people imagine at this point beyond is better than what I would do. So that's just sort of it.
I love it. For the longest time, it's felt like serial books and series were the thing to go. Every book had to be a series. And I love the one-offs where you have one story beginning to the end within the book itself.
A series is an awful lot to ask of an author. And I don't mean that as like, oh, they have to work so hard. I mean, it requires a consistency of, you know, top-notch, like entertainment all the time and never flag, never have a misstep that I certainly could not do. I think, and it also requires like a schedule that I'm a slow thinker and a slow writer. And if I were to keep up with the series, I just couldn't, I couldn't get my brain around something that people would want to read that way. So, and I also like a story that I can just put to bed, you know, done, take a couple weeks or whatever to think about it and appreciate something else, figure out what I want to read next, write next, and go on from there. Plus, I get bored with worlds. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I think George R.R. Martin must be bored. Like, seriously bored.
So. I would think so, yeah. I mean, all those books, that whole world, and I mean...
Yeah.
No wonder why
people are like, there are so many characters, and like, because he's bored.
Yeah, I would want to go out and write something else, something different.
Yeah. And I mean, and that should be the freedom of being a writer and doing something with art, is that you can just move on to a completely different world and try something else that, you know, really excites you. So that's sort of why I don't think I will ever write a series. But now that I've said that, of course I will one day. But yeah.
And we're going to be like, remember when you said you weren't going to write a series?
Right. You'll come back and taunt me.
Yes, we have it on audio now, so.
Yeah, oh no, this is a problem.
Yeah, never say never.
Now, and at the end of your book, I read the essay that you wrote about becoming a bookbinder.
Oh yeah.
What was that like?
Oh, it was insanity. I can actually, hold on, I can show you one of the original manuscripts. I don't know how well it's going to show up here. Like the gilding doesn't really show.
Yeah.
But that's what the bindings look like on the side.
Oh, wow.
So,
and that's traditional old school bindings. Because I didn't get a chance to read the last essay in this short story.
So yeah, I taught myself Japanese stab binding. And which is like the easiest way to bind loose pages. But I also I made Peabody's ledger and to submit to editors. My agent had this idea like, wouldn't it be cool if we could just send this thing as a book? And I was like, yeah, that would be really cool. And then I hung up the phone and started embarking on this crazy project, which I don't think she was anticipating me going that overboard, but I did. So, I tea stained all the edges of the pages to make them look really old, and was like filing them with a rasp, and I gilded the book, and I found this really old this old looking typeface. It's 1789 GLC Fournier. It has like it has like the commas and the apostrophes are really large, and it looks like it looks like what would be used for printing then. And so I typeset my pages, and I included a lot of the illustrations that did wind up in the book. I had done sketches of there and tea stained them and stuck them in the pages. And I wrecked this really old, I wrecked a tarot deck basically, which is kind of a creepy feeling. But yeah, I tea stained that and filed it down, and I tucked those cards in the pages. So people who got the original manuscript would open it, and all the stuff, like the story, would literally fall out on them. Yeah, I thought like the whole point of pitching that way was to buy into the story of Simon. You have to buy the idea that a book could be such a seductive object that you could lose yourself in it, and you could lose your life in it. And editors should get that of all people. They've been so seduced by books that they've made it their entire career. So I thought if I could send them this sort of object, they would understand the story. And a lot of people have probably ended up in a lot of recycling bins, just like because everyone's so used to getting digital files these days. But yeah, but it hit with the right people, and I wound up with a really fantastic editor who loves books just as much as I do, and had the understanding that she's like, "You sent me that beautiful book." And I said, "Oh my God, you think it's beautiful?" Yes. So
yeah. Perfect editor, yes.
Right. So from that point on, I was like, "Oh, you get it. Like you think I made art, and it wasn't just child's play. So this is all right. We're on the same page," which was a good sign.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think for an entire summer, basically my dining room was a book bindery, which is not really great for your marriage. But my husband's like super tolerant. He's a complete peach. My friends thought I was bonkers. Like I was covered in paper dust. I had like my fingers were just all tea stained and dyed, and like there were paper cuts everywhere. I cut my thumb using a paper drill. It was like a nightmare, but it was also really interesting. Yeah. So yeah, I felt like I had to put all of myself into it. Otherwise, I'd always wonder if I didn't sell the book, if it was because I hadn't tried hard enough. And I knew at the end of that summer, I said, well, no matter what, I definitely tried hard enough.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can quite beat that level of hard work that you put into that, because that is commendable, man.
It was crazy. But I mean, and anyone who saw it at that point realized, well, it's not like she's not gonna work, because she really knows how. So that was good. I wouldn't recommend doing that though. It's a weird way to pitch a book, and it has to be for a very specific project.
Yeah, I was thinking in my head, okay, so maybe for my book, when I start pitching it, maybe bookbinding. How tolerant would my husband be of bookbinding?
I mean, I would recommend doing one copy for yourself, because it's a really cool thing to have and be like, that's my book, baby. But but as a submitting strategy for your manuscript, not so much.
Yeah,
it seems like way too much work.
But it beats the hell out of like a regular query letter.
Yeah, it was, oh God, query letters are the worst. They're so awful. I just, yeah. So it was definitely
summaries are the worst. I've done some query letters, and I've done a few queries, and the query letters I've been okay with. It's that damn summary. I hate the summary.
Awful, because I think if you ask any writer like what their book is really about, the immediate answer is everything. That's what goes into it. Your entire, worldview is somehow condensed into this book. So you can give a plot line, like, sure, okay, man saves cat, but it's not about man saves cat. It's about everything. So yeah, the summaries they're terrible.
Yeah, I think I've written my summary about 10 times already, and I still don't like it. So yeah, I'm starting my next version of it.
It gets better. It gets better, sort of. Not really. No. I'm trying one right now. No.
It's like, oh, it gets better. Just like what you tell kids when they're in high school and it's a really hard time. It gets better.
It's better. No, it doesn't. It's just different.
I'm doomed.
It's a very encouraging talk we're giving here.
We totally are. Be a writer, kids. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be amazing. It's the most enjoyable misery because it's terrible, but you willfully inflict it upon yourself because you do like it. You hate every second that you're loving it. So that's sort of what it is. That's what it is to me anyway.
Yeah, I have those moments when I'm on deadline and I have to write an article. I'll think, leading up to the article, I like dread it. Like I dread sitting down and writing it. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, do I even love writing if this is how I feel like leading up to it? It's like, oh, I have to write my article now. But then I get writing, and if it's like a good one, if I'm in a groove, that's when I get all excited. And it's like, oh.
The best thing is when you sit down and like 2 hours just goes away.
Yeah.
It's gone. And it's like, oh, that was a good writing day. How did that happen? But it's so rare. But I mean, yeah, the sitting down and forcing yourself to do it is just universally terrible. But having written, of course, feels good. And, if you can look back a couple weeks later and still, and start to appreciate what you did, that's fantastic, And I do that sometimes. I get there sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
What is your routine for writing when you're working on something?
So I am actually talking to you now from my desk, which is a treadmill desk. So I doubly abuse myself by walking and writing and editing. So I try and get 4 hours a day in 2-hour blocks. A lot of that is failure time, which is just me sitting there deleting words a lot. So I do that. I try and do it every day just because, and not that I'm productive every day, but if it becomes a habit, it's easier, and then I feel worse when I break the habit, so I get back more quickly. But that said, I think everybody's process is so different, and if somebody tries to do what I do, they'll probably be miserable. And if I tried to do what somebody else did, they'd probably be miserable,
Yeah, I think I would be miserable at a treadmill desk. I mean, okay, so concept of the treadmill desk here.
Yeah.
Because I'm a klutz. So I can't imagine having to be, walking and chewing gum at the same time, not really good for me.
Right.
So walking and typing, or
it's not that bad. It's because you just put it on like the slowest speed. So it's a little bit more like you're pacing and typing. Or you're pacing. If you ever like pace and talk on the phone, it's essentially the same thing. If that makes sense. So it's that same. You're going really slowly, but I just found that after putting in a ton of hours sitting, it just kills your back. And I wasn't thinking as well either because I'd be in pain from sitting. So then I would try a standing desk, and then I'd be in pain from standing. And so the easiest way to really get in the hours that I wanted to get without feeling like I was gonna die seemed to be the treadmill desk. And who knows, I may get sick of this too, but it's been about a year, and I'm good with it. And I feel like I've been more productive with it, which is nice. So who knows, maybe the writing's worse. We don't know yet, but yeah, so that works for me.
So we do have to announce our winner before we forget.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
We have to announce our winner of the book before we forget. Yeah. And our winner is Rachel Conroy.
Ooh, yay. Congratulations, Rachel.
So we will be in touch with you soon, Rachel.
Yes, Diana handles all of that. I don't know how the giveaway works. I just make the posts and share it.
Well, this time around, yeah, it's Rafflecopter makes things wonderfully easy for me. Yeah, you just enter in the stuff. They already have some things set up where, they had two options this time around. They had either follow you, Erika, on Twitter. That was one entry, yes. And then the other possible entry, they could get another entry for subscribing to us on YouTube.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Well done.
So, yeah, they got an entry for each, and then that works. And then it picks the winner randomly for me, so I don't even have to pull it out of a hat.
Oh, that's so nice. I need to get on that. I have no idea what to give away now, but that's fine.
I have to go put him down because he's like a
Oh,
furnace.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, what
He's
a
like,
sweetie.
the wine and him are like making me die over here.
Good wine, then. It's very good wine.
So while she's doing that, I want to talk the seer, whose name I can never pronounce properly. Was it?
Yeah. I say it Madame Ritskova. And I say that because that is how the reader on the audiobook says it, Ari Fleikos, whose name I also can't say. But he pronounced it so well and convincingly that I was like, I will go with that. So there is unity across the platform.
I really liked her character, and I feel like a lot of what happened to Amos's family line was because of her.
Yeah.
So, I mean, did you intend on her being the bad guy, quote unquote, or?
Yeah, because I think, and I guess, again, you can kind of see this with Doyle. I think very few people are inherently bad. And I'm much more interested in when good intentions go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
That is something that's always fascinated me. Just the idea, like, she doesn't really mean to curse the whole family or anything like that. She means it as a thing of protection because she loves him so much, and she sees this, she sees Evangeline as an interloper. So it's the best of intentions that's just gone so wrong. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of how I saw it. And I think in family dynamics, if you talk to anyone in a completely broken family, mm-hmm. no one thinks they're the broken person in it. So everybody in the 1790s thinks that they are doing the exact right thing at all times, mm-hmm. which means, of course, they're all behaving completely wrong. So that was my intent with her. She's really wanting to be a protector, but since she doesn't understand the whole of the situation, she can't be.
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was almost like she created like the self-fulfilling prophecy with Amos, where Evangeline wasn't necessarily going to do anything bad, but she made it so that bad stuff would end up happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So she made the things happen. She put that into it.
Yeah, she definitely planted the seeds for it without knowing that she was doing so. It was, mm-hmm. she put up sort of a Romeo and Juliet situation. Like, no, you can't see her. She's terrible. Of course I'm going to see her because you said she's terrible.
Yes, every teenager knows that. As soon as mom tells me no, I'm going to totally do it.
I mean, I think honestly that's why there is so much YA fiction right now. It's because it's just like teenagers are amazing to write because they have immediate motivations and they're just on all the time, full force.
Consequences, what are those? We don't know consequences.
Or we can take those consequences. It's fine.
The hormones made me do it, I swear.
I love that. I mean, I find that so appealing, and I guess I got to do that with Amos and Evangeline a lot. So it was fun. Writing a over the top romance is fun in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And for the tarots, the readings and the layouts that you did, it was all really intricate, and I don't know anything about tarot, but it sounded really convincing. What kind of research did you do when you were working on that part of the novel?
I did a bunch of research, and I also in college I read tarot for a little while because I was a drama student, and it's every 19-year-old drama student is like, I'm looking for answers in the universe, and clearly tarot has it. So
yeah,
I learned how to read tarot cards in college, but and I let it go for a while. And when I started working on this book, I realized that it was such a great format for language because we already use them as a language as they are in tarot. So it felt really natural to use them that way. But the spreads that I talk about are all actual ways that you would deal cards. And the deck that I largely describe is based off of the Rider-Waite deck, which is in the U.S. the most commonly recognized deck. There are lots of really, really cool decks out there, but those are the ones that when you think of tarot, you think of that. The illustrations on those, Pixie Smith did them, and she doesn't get spoken of much but like when you think of tarot illustrations, you're thinking of her work, which is really cool. So yeah, I did a lot of research on as far as trying to get the meanings down and refreshing my memory and what the spreads would look like. But as far as trying to figure out the language, I kind of built my own language, which was like fun and difficult. And if you ever get the chance to do that, you should. But as a consequence, I can't really read tarot cards anymore just because I still sort of think of them that way, you know, as this language I wound up building. So yeah, it was a bunch of research, but it was also, that's the fun research, you know, that's just getting to play and read a lot of books. So.
And I think the biggest, so we were talking earlier about bombshells, and the biggest bombshell for me was the Frank and Paulina love affair.
Yeah.
That was just totally out of the blue.
And I kept thinking, like, why does this man care about this house so much? Like, I get the concerned neighbor and, like, the family friend, but he was, like, when he came in and started yelling at him, I was like, okay, it's not your house.
And I've done estate planning. I've seen some nosy neighbors in my time. Seriously.
If your neighbor's that nosy, there's something going on.
Yeah, because he was really up in there. Like he thought he was part of the family. Right.
So yeah, I think well, something had to happen with Frank just because the book is telling the story of these two families, or three essentially, traveling through time together, and people who are drawn to each other through reasons of history and similar interest. So, you know, the Peabodys have been circling the Watsons for a number of years. And so Frank and Paulina happening is just sort of, in some way, a natural progression of something from the past. So that's how it came about that way. And also, I really love the idea of little embedded relationships in small towns. You know, because everybody knows each other and everyone thinks, oh, we're all so upstanding, but no, you're not. You're all people and we're all terrible. So
I feel like it's like those close-knit areas, and I don't offend anyone, but like the close-knit communities that tend to stir up the pot.
Right, because everyone's just living on top of each other. And I think, but not like they are in cities. In cities, you know, terrible things can happen 2 doors away and nobody knows because you're all, you know, boxed in. But in small towns, you're supposed to be open and friendly, but at the same time, you each have your own little horrors. So I enjoy the way things like that overlap. So yeah, it was fun to write that. And that, incidentally, is the chapter that my very good friend Stephanie called me about in the middle of the night. Yeah, so that's like, she read an early draft, and when I had that in, she called me up. She's like, oh my God, chapter 19, oh my God. I was like, oh, okay, all right, so it works, good. Which is, you need a reader who does that for you. That's really reaffirming.
Well, and then at the end, you know, Frank's telling him all of this, and at first I thought maybe he just loved her and she never knew about it. And then you keep reading and no, she definitely knew about it. And then at the end when he's like, oh, by the way, your daughter.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, he didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you tell somebody who just shattered your entire worldview? And it's like, you just try and I think being a vindictive person, would try and shatter it right back. So
I was so rooting for Simon when he did that. I was like, yes, tell him.
Because the whole book, he's like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to mess this up. All right, screw it. We're done.
I think that was like a breakthrough moment almost for Simon, because that's when he, like, from that point on, he really just Like, he was done not making waves. And he was like, something needs to be done. We need to handle this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was necessary because I had to break the view he had of his perfect mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that is, his mother is the entire reason why he's still holding on to everything and this sainted sort of idea that he has of her and that he doesn't understand really what happened. So breaking that breaks everything that sort of holds him back. So it had to be big, and it had to be pretty terrible.
Well, it succeeded.
Yes, it is exceed expectations.
And for I just thought of another question when we were talking about that, and nope, straight out of my head.
And it's gone.
Good wine. Very good wine.
Right? I haven't even finished the glass yet.
It was a good pour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like halfway through. This is terrible. But I am drinking a Long Island wine from the North Shore. It's a Gewürztraminer from Martha Clara Vineyards.
How is that? Because I'm going to try my first Gewürztraminer or whatever you call it.
Nice. They're quite sweet, but it's not as sweet as a Riesling. But I like them, you know. Okay. And then you don't have to say I'm drinking Pinot Grigio.
I'm going to France next week. I'll be there during next week, and we're going to go to Alsace. And so they have those. They have Rieslings, and they have Muscat, which I'm going to make myself try one because I typically don't like Moscato. So I'm going to see if it's slightly different. If maybe I might like this one. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But I'm going to keep my opportunity.
You like it because of the atmosphere.
Yeah, I might be one of those people. Yeah. But I'm tempted to. That's one of the specialty wines that they're going to have. So I'm looking forward to trying that.
Oh, that's going to be good. I'm jealous. I'm very jealous.
So yes, my husband's going to be the one driving, and my sister and I are just going to get sloshed and recreate the famous Absolutely Fabulous scene in the winery in France, where we're just covered in wine. And
yes,
yeah,
this is that's
the only way to spend a birthday now is to just get sloshed.
We've been friends for a very long time, but I don't like you right now.
You're allowed not to like me sometimes.
I know. So are you working on anything right now?
I am. I have somewhere back there a giant stack of drafts. So I'm very close to, I think I'm very close at this point to getting to where where I think my agent will be happy with it. So yeah, and it's really different, but I am super excited about it. So yeah. So no more circus for this one, and you will not be seeing any of the same characters. It is largely in 1986 Florida, along the coast. Yeah, so Florida is a very, very cool place, and I'm capitalizing on some of the Florida weirdness, but not necessarily making it about the Florida weirdness. So yeah. I lived there for a couple of years, and I found it really fascinating because the culture is really, really interesting, and the environment is super interesting, like giant insects. Oh my God. Super giant insects. So yeah, I just sort of felt like visiting that place again. And 1986 is a great year, and I got to do a lot of fun pop culture research from back in the day and trying to jog my memory from like what I had growing up and stuff. So yeah. I realized there was like an astronaut outfit for My Little Ponies. I was like, oh, this is amazing. What? Yeah, and this is some of the research I got to do. So I was like, whatever you're writing, set it in the 80s. The research is amazing. It's so much fun.
The 80s were awesome.
Yeah, it was really interesting, really, really ugly pop culture. Like, so it's great. But and there's still a lot of stuff preserved in digital archives and things. Like I was trying to find an issue of like Fangoria or something just randomly, and it was like all I had to do is Fangoria 1986, and all just popped up. It was like, oh great, this is so different from having to dig stuff up from like 1792. So easier time period.
Yes, sounds like it for sure.
And I see right now, I feel like all of the 90s fashion is like starting to make a comeback. Like all of a sudden I've seen all this like crushed velvet
Yeah.
stuff. And I'm like, I don't like, I mean, I was, you know, a kid in the 90s and I didn't pay attention. I wasn't one of the girls that paid attention to fashion really. But I don't really remember the 90s being known for its phenomenal fashion.
No, because grunge reigned for so much of it, and then the boy band thing happened, which was even worse.
I rocked a flannel. I lived in flannels and overalls and
the baby doll dress and thermals.
Huh?
The baby doll dress with thermals and Doc Martens. Yeah.
Yes.
The grunge.
I remember that.
Yeah. It was just, yeah, so I'm not really sure why that's back. I mean, I know everything old is new again, but I would be okay with skipping that. I would rather, honestly, I would rather have the giant shoulder pads from the 80s. Like,
yeah, the 80s had some rocking fashion. I think I would take the 80s, some of the 80s fashion stuff over the 90s, except for the chokers, which I don't mind those coming back. Overalls can just stay in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
And flannel too.
And the midriff came out in the 90s. And I feel we're all better for that just staying covered on everybody. Like no one, honestly, like no one really has a great midriff. And or,
no, I don't anymore.
I never did, but yeah. So we can just, the midriff can stay there. I won't write any 90s because I don't want to look at that.
Yeah, I was a toothpick in the 90s, so, you know, I could do the midriff, no problem. I'm not a toothpick anymore, so, yeah, no midriff.
No.
Well, I do.
Bad look.
Yeah.
I have, like, the high-rise shorts now, but I don't wear, like, the crop tops with them. I just use it as an extra layer of support. Right. I wear the regular tops over it. So it's really like the mom gene of this current fashion trend.
The mom gene. Like it's the mom gene had that like the weird, the butt was weird on the mom gene. It was just like, oh, it was so bad. But
yeah, I feel like the high-rise pants now are more 40s style, which is acceptable. I would be okay with 1940s style coming back.
Yeah, I would be good with that too. Again, shoulder pads, but I don't know.
Lesson of the night: shoulder pads are in.
Shoulder pad, no midriff.
No. Well, I think our hour is up, but I really want to thank you, Erika, for joining us. We had so much fun with you.
Oh, you guys were great. Thank you so much. This has been a blast.
And I don't know if you caught an earlier episode, but Diana and I actually each bought a copy of this book without talking to each other.
We talked to each other. We did talk to each other.
We didn't plan it. Like, we didn't say, like, oh, we're going to read this book.
You copied me. You totally copied me.
It was on my
book at Target. I was like,
friend fight, isn't it?
Yeah. You cannot hide the fact that you copied me on this book. I will not.
Okay, I do remember going to Target and seeing it on the shelf and going, I feel like Diana has talked about this book. And at the time, Target Cartwheel app had that awesome thing where if you like filled up your points,
oh yeah,
you could get a free book. So that's basically why I did all my food shopping at Target. So
that's not a bad idea.
And they took it away, and I'm very sad. But I got it, and then I sent a picture of it to Diana, and I said, I feel like you've talked about this book before. But neither of us had read it, and then we were doing Wine, Women, Words, and I said, you know, I think we should do this for a book of the month. So we have been waiting to read this for like 6 months, I feel like.
I'm so glad you did. You guys are delightful. Like this was.
Thank you. And the next book that we're doing, and I should have pulled it from my my shelf, is A Girl Like You by Michelle Cox, who is actually a local here. I'm having coffee with her on Monday. So it's going to be fun to have. I love having authors on my side of the country who can sympathize with a 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock showtime. But
Like me,
West Coast.
early birds like me, right?
Friday mornings are usually like, I don't even bother making a
Right.
list for myself because like this one glass of wine, even though it's not really that bad. But the next morning I'm like, oh my God, I hate my life.
At 10 or 11 at night. Yeah, no, that's what it is.
But thank you so much. We had so much fun with you.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so when the next book comes out, we'll have to have you back on the show.
Absolutely. I'll have to write faster.
And when you do come back, we're all going to have to do shoulder pads.
Oh, absolutely. I will haul out some big shoulder pads.
We can rock some shoulder pads.
Yes.
Shoulder pads and themed glasses and mugs.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah, good night.
Bye.
Bye.